Alright, the second part of this video is going to be focused on connecting the power wire, which is going to go from the back of the gauge, which will be right here. And we need to wire this all the way back down the way we came in the first video, to the side panel here, through the opening here, back down into the footwell. Eventually, what we want to do is connect a few of the wires in that power wire to the fuse box located here. And then one of the wires is going to be connected to a ground. And for the purpose of this video, we are going to be using so I can get a better video. We're going to be using that bolt to the right of where the clutch pedal meets the firewall. We're going to be using that as our ground. As you can see, the power wire that's supplied by ProSport is a universal kit. Because each car is different, they only supply you with a minimal amount of power wiring. It's extremely small, and there's no way that we can run this down to the footwell. So we need to measure how much extra wire we're going to need. You can see that the power wire is split into 4 different colors. We have red, white, orange, and black. The black is going to be connected to the ground to the right bolt of the clutch pedal. This white one, for the purpose of this gauge, is going to be connected to a power source that is only turned on when the ignition is on. The orange is going to be connected to either the headlights or the taillights. From what I've read online, the purpose of the orange is to provide an auto dimming feature for the gauge, depending on whether it is nighttime or daytime. Obviously, the intensity of the gauge's light will probably dim a little bit more at night and will probably be brighter during the day. The red is going to be connected to a constant power source. We are going to discuss which fuse to use and how to determine which fuse is going to go for each of these 3 colors. So let's go ahead and first measure how much extra wiring we're going to need for our 16 gauge wire. This is probably going to be a rough estimate. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just over-exaggerate my measurements. Because I'm also going to route an AFR gauge, I'm going to take the furthest measurement away, which would be to my second gauge cluster on my Accelerate gauge pod. So from there to the left, we have about 21 inches. Let's go ahead and measure down to the side panel here. We have about another foot, so we're going to make that 31 inches. And then from this side panel here down to the fuse box, again exaggerating our measurements, we have about 20 inches, so that's the 51. And if I go all the way to the clutch pedal, it's about another 30 inches. I'm sorry, another 9 inches. So 51 plus 9, so we're going to go about 60 inches of additional wiring for each of those 4 wires that I showed you earlier. So let's go ahead and get these connected on our workbench, and we will start using some butt connectors and start extending our power wire. Okay, so we've already routed the vacuum line to the filter, to the boost gauge, which are all inside the cabin of the car, and connected that to the back of our ProSport gauge. The next thing we're going to go ahead and tackle is the power line, and we're going to be connecting this to 4 different areas. The first thing we need to do is extend our power line. I went ahead and remeasured. I'm actually not going to do about 60 inches. I'm going to do about 50 inches for each of these 4 wires that you see here. And we're going to go ahead and route these, extend these using our 16 gauge wire that we bought from the hardware store. I went ahead and already cut 4 lengths of this to 50 inches each. And the next thing we need to do is strip the ends. In order to find out how much we need to take off, I'm going to take one of my gold-plated butt terminals, I decided to get gold plated in order to get the best connection, and they're relatively inexpensive. Let's go ahead and take one of these out. And the way this works is you're going to go ahead and connect one wire into here and connect another end into here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the clamping portion of your wiring pliers and you're going to crimp down in between the middle and where the metal ends. You don't want to crimp down all the way at the other end here. So we need to go ahead and measure how much is going to go in here. So it's just a rough estimate. You can go on the outside. So I'm probably going to need to strip to about here to get to the middle. So let's go ahead and strip this wire. If you take your wire pliers, you can go ahead and find the numbers on the side here and find the one that says 16, which represents 16 gauge wire. Going to twist. I don't know if this is the best method, but I always rotate it around a little bit. Once it gets nice and loose, we can go ahead and pull out. And now we have all of our wiring here. Want to check to make sure we don't have anything that's split. Everything looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and braid this a little bit. If you were doing an extension inside the engine cabin, one of the representatives at the hardware store told me to get a special kind of grease to coat over your butt connector, as well as putting a heat shrink wrapping over it to protect it from the elements. But since we're extending our wires only inside, there's no need for me to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this inside the gold-plated butt connector, push it inside nice and tight. Take my clamping tool, pushing down a little bit off of the middle, right where the gold plating is, and we're going to squeeze all the way at the end to get the most leverage. Alright, I made a pretty dumb mistake there. I used the wrong end of these pliers to clamp down. I ended up actually cutting the butt connector in half. So, learning as I go here, I've never done this before. But we're going to go ahead and I stripped a little bit more off of the 16 gauge wire. We're going to reinsert it. This time I'm going to use a different plier and use the end that is not sharp, which would have been smart to do from the beginning. And we're just going to clamp down here. Okay, great. And it's going to make a small indentation. I'm going to pull out a little bit on the connection to make sure it's secure. That looks good to me. All right, and we're going to go ahead and repeat this for all 4 of the other power wires. All right, and we're on our last piece of wire. Oh, this gets easier the more you do it. I'm sure I'm making a ton of mistakes here, so first time doing any kind of wiring. Strip it out, and then actually probably should have read my pliers, but this end right here says for crimping, and on the other side it gives you what gauge of wire you can crimp. So if you put it towards the middle, it's for 12 to 10 gauge. Further out is 22 to 14. We're at 16, so of course we want to use that part. All right, and we're pretty good to go. So what's going to happen is I have 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what's going to happen is those 4 are going to connect to the other 4 wires on my power wire for my boost gauge. So let's go ahead and extend these right now. It doesn't really matter which one you're going to use. According to ProSport, these are all 16 gauge wire. So I'm going to do one for my white. Actually, it's probably easier if I clear out here. Take our crimper again, and we're going to crimp. Test the connection. It looks good. We're going to repeat that for the other three. Alright, so what we've went ahead and done is extend our power wire for the boost gauge. This is what the power wire used to look like. It was about maybe a foot long. We added some gold-plated butt connectors for each of the 4 wires. And then we extended the wires using 16 gauge wire for an extra 50 feet per wire. And I went ahead and added, as you can see, some zip ties sporadically throughout the extension just to keep it nice and clean and make routing the power wire a little bit easier. To the end of the power wire, which will connect to the boost gauge, I've put in some wiring. And what I'm going to use this for is to pull it up through the cavities and starting at the bottom of the footwell to make it easier to route the wiring. So let's go ahead and pull this guy through. One good trick you can use is to use a flashlight to kind of see where the wiring is coming from. So in this case, it's coming right here to the side, which is great. So now I have my lead wire here, and we're going to pull this up and through. Make sure not to pull too roughly. Okay, so now we have this wire here. We're going to want to connect this to the next cavity, which is going to be up and to the left, almost at the corner of the A-pillar. Sometimes what you can do is wrap this around to get a bend like that, and then loop it up and over. Perfect, just like that. And we will continue to feed this through.